Well, folks, it's been a long time since most of the people in the independent media have had a chance to report on anything that doesn't involve a person whose first name starts with a B and a last name starts with a K. It's really weird that CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and the majority of other mainstream outlets have turned into the KNN and other branches about it. But that is the culture we're living in, and it's a good thing to be able to sit and watch the government at work rather than have to watch it from the sidelines. But there is a story that I want to talk about, mainly because I want to make sure that it doesn't get swept under the rug by all of this Kavanaugh talk. And I have a distinct fear that it will get swept under the rug just because it's a Trump success in every sense of the word. And there's no way that the left media has really been able to smear it yet that I've seen. When the president was campaigning, one of his biggest promises is that he was going to renegotiate the disastrous NAFTA deal that's out there that's screwing American workers. This is something he's been critical of since long before he ever thought about getting into politics, and it was something that he talked about renegotiating even when he was in the private sector. Now, right now, I will admit, due to scheduling, I have not had a chance to sit down and read the text of the USMCA, the new NAFTA, as you would call it. I have it linked in the description below, and I invite everybody to go through and read it, and as soon as I'm done with this video, I am actually going to sit down and read it myself. But I have been able to read some of the reporting on it and listen to some of the other reporting on it, and I kind of like where it was going. Now, I've mentioned it before in my videos and in my blog that I grew up in a union household, so NAFTA's always been kind of a sticking point for us. It's something that's always been on the back of everybody's mind, especially when a Republican comes into the highest office of the land. I heard numerous times throughout the W presidency that because W was president and because there were Republicans that were winning in Congress, that meant that they were going to pack up my dad's job. They were actually going to go into the private sector, pack up my dad's job, and move it down to Mexico. Now, this wasn't actually going to happen directly. I do believe at some point that the unioners in this country don't completely understand the separation of private sector unions and public sector unions, but I think that's a lot more of union propaganda than it is based in fact. However, it doesn't change the fact that the way that NAFTA was written, it actually wasn't too far-fetched to believe that there were going to be incentives and good reasons for a company like the one that my dad worked for and companies otherwise that make steel, that machine things, that just in general make things in this country, moving their production down to Mexico, where the average wage is usually a third of what it is here. Now, one of the most obvious things that I want to talk about, especially given the fact that the big thing that was told to me when I was growing up was the fact that the Republicans just wanted to move my dad's job to Mexico because they did pay less per hour and the cost of production would be lower and would put more money into the greedy CEO's pocket. This is an article from Vox that's talking about the USMCA, the new NAFTA that we have out there. And there's a clause in there that I really, really like. In this article, they talk about the fact that by 2023, the agreement calls that 40 to 45% of automobiles or their content be made in plants where workers make at least $16 an hour by 2023. Now, believe it or not, this is a huge fork in the eye to people who say that this agreement is nothing but a way to make the rich get richer or put people out of a job, as people have been saying for my entire life. This makes it almost impossible, or at least not financially expedient, for a person to go down and make their car in Mexico or otherwise. Now, I do understand the fact that this is going to have an effect on compact car manufacture, and it is going to take some of the compact car manufacture out of this country, just based on the fact that, especially with the Japanese market out there, the compacts are not going to be able to keep up. they're actually still going to have to sit and pay the tariffs in order to stay competitive when you buy something like a Ford Focus or a Chevy Sonic. But on the other hand, when you're buying some of these bigger ticket items like trucks, vans, minivans, commercial vehicles, and luxury cars, that's going to be a drop in the bucket if you're going to have to pay a little bit more cost of production, and you're going to wind up paying more in the tariff than you would in the little bit of extra labor that you would have to put in order to pay your workers at a decent rate. And this is going to force Mexico to step up too, in all honesty. You're going to continue to see some of the compact car manufacturing get done down in Mexico, but compact cars are getting to be a dying breed. Yes, there are always going to be people that buy them, but the market demand isn't enough to keep people in work and keep people working long term in a plant unless you have another line going down there. And I think that's going to incentivize the manufacturers like Ford, GM, and Chrysler, who have plants down in Mexico, to raise their wages and start putting some money into Mexico, or at least giving the people the chance to earn it, rather than having to run over the border and get over here to earn it. Believe it or not, I think this is going to be a way to keep the Mexican people in Mexico and have them start to find ways to make their country livable rather than running away from it, as we talked about when we talked about the border wall. One of the last things that I want to point out on this is the fact that this has a sunset clause in it. And that's something that's caused some concern and maybe given the left-leaning media institutes a talking point that they can use when they try and chop this down and make this not a win for Donald Trump. According to the articles that I've been reading, including this one by Vox, which I've been citing throughout this entire article, the agreement has a sunset. It goes into effect and then it ends after 16 years, which no matter what would mean that Trump would be out of office by then. Therefore, it becomes a negotiating tool for the next person that the people of the United States put in to the highest office of the land. Trump originally wanted a 5-year contract on this, but in the clause there's also a 6-year negotiation period. And again, after Trump was out of office and when the next person is in. But I think this is important no matter what, no matter which way you look at it. I was very young when NAFTA went into effect, so I don't know the exact mechanics of it. But I do know the fact that it was put into place in 1992, and therefore it has been in effect for 26 years. With this new agreement that we have between the three countries, we have a 16-year limit on it, which means that we don't have to commit to anything forever in order to put it into place. What that means is that every 6 years we get to sit down and talk about this again and figure out what's working and what isn't. We can add clauses and take care of job stifling regulations, or we can remove clauses and open up markets and freedoms within the agreement. We can change this document. This is a fluid document, and they've given a finite time period as to when we can change it, so we're not just sitting here and arguing about it constantly throughout the 16 years that it's in place. We go through, we try it for 6 years, and then we go and figure out what isn't working and what is working. I think that's a very important part to this document, and I'm glad that it's in there. I know the sunset clause is cause for people to say that this is just something that Trump kicked down the road, but if we can sit here and change this, especially after our governments change hands, then we can sit here and make this into an agreement that we try and reinstate every 16 years. All we do is sit here and make sure that we continue to tweak it and change it until it works for everybody and it's fair for everybody involved. Barack Obama was famous for saying that those jobs that left this country were never coming back. Between NAFTA and less restrictive environmental regulations in other countries, it was easy to see why he could believe that they weren't coming back. And it does lend itself some credence to the fact that in spite of the fact that the union partially controls the Democrat Party, the Democrats in this country do want to see a country where we are nothing but IT professionals, bankers, and service workers. They do want to see a lot of these jobs gone for one reason or another. And that's really hard for me to wrap my head around. We have such a large population that's so diverse, and we have people that make things. We have people that are very good at making things. Even if we took a lot of the robotics out of this country, there are still a lot of Americans in this country who could sit here and machine and fashion and make things the way that they used to before robotics came in and made these sectors a little less labor intensive. There are still people out there that can do that, and I'm really glad that they want to be in this country and make things, whether they do it on a small scale or they do it on the big assembly line that Henry Ford put into place years ago. I think this agreement is a very good thing for the American people, and I actually look forward to sitting down and reading through the full text. I don't want to go by hearsay entirely. I actually want to see what it is that we are putting into place right now. I think the biggest evidence for the fact that this is a good deal, a good thing, and a victory for our president is the fact that the media continues to be fully focused on Kavanaugh and everything that surrounds him, even as the news stories fall apart. This story was barely a blip on the radar. There were a few left-leaning outlets that put it out there and a few independent commenters that have talked about it on their shows. But for the most part, this is going largely ignored. And I'd like to see this blasted out. I'd like to see this be the front line of the news. But your CNNs and your MSNBCs will never put it out there as the front page of the news because there's a ricin attack going through the mailboxes and nobody knows who the next Supreme Court justice is going to be or whether or not Brett Kavanaugh is going to get confirmed. What do you think about the new North American trade agreement, and how is this going to affect your life directly or indirectly? I always welcome a thoughtful and positive discussion in the comment section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care, everyone.
You're always there for me in my best hiding place.